We have been talking about what is called the Paticca Samuppada. We called it the Antecedent Concurrence. And I don't have to go through it again because already you have, I hope you have understood it, at least to some extent. The important thing about that is that we become aware of how we create the world throughout the mental process of perception. And we also create ourselves. In other words, the world as well as the self are not really existing things, although we think they are existing. We think the world exists and we think we exist, and then we begin to have a relationship between the world and ourselves. And that relationship creates all the suffering. So it is only by fully understanding that we are able to gain freedom from all that suffering and unhappiness. Now we have already discussed this, and someone wanted to know how we can get out of this trouble. And we discussed the first part of it. The part means there are 8 steps which we call the supernormal eightfold way. We call it supernormal because to be free of this is not a normal thing. So in other words, we are bringing a normal person into a supernormal state. That is the message of the Buddha. So, the first steps we have already discussed, the first 5 steps. And now we are going to discuss the last step. We have also discussed what is called the harmonious exercise. We already discussed. And now we talk about what is called the 7 steps to awakening. So in other words, we have to awaken from the dream of existence. And this existence is of 2 kinds: an objective existence of the world and a subjective existence of ourselves. We have to awaken from that dream of existence. We said we have to do the harmonious exercise. And that harmonious exercise was to withdraw our attention from focusing on what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. You see, the important thing is to understand that we have only a body. We don't have a separate thing called a mind. We are only having a body. And according to modern scientific thinking, they have discovered that we have only a body. We don't have a thing called mind. And what we call the mind is simply three activities of the body. Now you know that in our body we have these five senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the whole body becomes a sense organ. And there we are able to perceive. That means we can see things, hear things, smell things, taste things, and touch things. Now, even in the history of Western philosophy, there was a school of philosophy that started saying, whatever we know about the world, all that comes from these five senses. And there was another school of philosophy that was thinking that we have a thing called a mind, and it is through the mind that we become aware of the world. But these people who are talking about the five senses, they say, we don't have a thing called mind to talk about. We have only these five senses. And it is only the five senses that we are able to perceive things and know about the world. Now this is why, but the Buddha pointed out that there is another thing. These perceptions through the five senses, they are called perceptions. But whatever is perceived through the five senses is carried to the brain through nerves, the optic nerve, the auditory nerve, olfactory nerve, and so on. These nerves are like telephone wires carrying messages to the brain. And the brain begins to think and reason out and interpret and give meaning to what was seen or heard or smelled or tasted or touched. And that the Buddha called mano. Of course, during the time of the Buddha, people didn't know much about the brain. Because some people thought the mind was in the heart, not in the brain. But Buddha didn't want to tell something that other people don't know. So he didn't speak about the mind. But he knew that it was the mind. So he only used the word mano to refer to that activity of the mind.
Activity of the brain.
Activity of the brain, yeah. And so, it's very important to understand that there are two ways. One way is to perceive through the senses, sensory perception. And the other is not perception, it is called conception. Conception is to think and give meaning to what was perceived. So what is conceived through the thinking part of the brain, that is the mano. So that is called mano vijnana. Mano vijnana, today they translate the word vijnana as consciousness. But that is not correct. Vijnana of the senses, that is perception, not consciousness. But when it comes to the mano and the mano vijnana, that is not perception, that is conception, and that can be called consciousness. Because we begin to give meaning to what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. So, but it doesn't end there. Once we have given meaning, then we begin to react emotionally to what was perceived and conceived. That is the work of what is called chitta. The word chitta is what we can call the mood. Chitta is the mood. And mood means, we have another word for it, is called the temper or the temperament. So what we call the temperament is the mood. And mood means it can be calm and tranquil, or it can be agitated and excited. So the mood can be in two forms: the calm state of the mood or the agitated, excited state of the mood. So chitta can be like that. So it is the chitta that is really creating all the problems. Why? Because chitta gets emotionally excited, and then there is all the fighting and the quarreling and the desiring for pleasures and hating pains, the angers, fears, worries, all come from this. And the interesting thing is that the chitta cannot think. Chitta is the animal brain of the human being. The animal brain of the human being. In other words, the human being is partly animal and only partly human. The human part is the thinking part, which is called mano, and the animal part is the emotional part. And this emotional part is not aware of reality. Reality can become aware of the reality through the mano, the thinking part. And mano is aware of reality. And what is this reality? The reality is that everything is dependent on conditions. And what is dependent on conditions is unstable. And what is unstable is not as we want. We want stability in everything. But because it is unstable and impermanent, we don't like to grow old, we don't like to fall sick, we don't like to die, but that is what happens. Instability of our body, instability of everything that we become attached to. And that is what makes us unhappy, because our emotions are going against reality. The conflict between our emotions and reality. And that conflict is creating all the unhappiness, all the crime in the world, all the wars in the world, all the killing, all the terrorism, all that is coming from these emotions. So this is why the Buddha pointed out, the first thing is to learn to gain control over our behavior, and that is called sila. And after that, that is not enough. We have to gain control over our emotional agitations. We have to calm the mind. The calmness is what is called Samadhi. And not only that, that calmness cannot be maintained till we have become aware of reality and accepted reality. That acceptance of reality can be done only by mano. And how we are able to do that is what we call awakening from the dream of existence. And that there are 7 steps. The 7 steps, the first step is to take our attention away from what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and focus our attention inwards, which is called introspection. And that introspection has to be maintained 24 hours, not just 1 minute or 2 minutes or even 1 hour, or even 1 day. It has to be done 24 hours a day. And only then that we begin to become aware of all the mistakes we are making, which is our reaction to what is going on outside. That reaction is the disturbance. So, we already said that becoming aware, there are 4 places to focus our attention: on the body, on the feeling in the body, the emotional state, and the thoughts that arise in the mind. These 4 things. That is what is called Satipatthana. The systematic introspection. That's what I call it. Not mindfulness. And when we do that systematic introspection, we begin to understand a very important thing. That is, that this emotional reaction begins with the way we interpret our circumstances. So if we begin to interpret our circumstances in the right way, our mind will be calm. If we interpret it in the wrong way, the mind gets disturbed. So this is the important thing. When that is understood, that is the second step. That is called Dhamma Vichaya. Dhamma really means our concept, how we interpret our circumstances. That is the Dhamma. And when we have become fully aware of the Dhamma, then we know what is the cause of the emotion, and this way we begin to understand by changing the way we interpret our circumstances, we can gain full control over the chitta, that is mood, that is getting excited. With that realization, the mind gets confidence. Now you have confidence. It is possible to change and keep the mind calm under all circumstances. With that confidence, you begin to feel a power. That is the real willpower that we speak about. The real willpower is coming from the cognitive process called mano. So when that happens, the mind becomes happy. The mind is happy. That is what we call contentment. Piti. Piti is a happiness. Very often we find that this happiness is very often translated as rapture. the word rapture. But normally if we look in the dictionary, the meaning of the word rapture, it is explained as an excitement. But when I looked at a dictionary of philosophy, I began to realize that rapture originally doesn't mean emotional excitement. It's a state of calm, tranquil state of the mind. So we can use the word rapture provided we understand that it is a state of tranquility rather than an emotional excitement. So the word priti is really that state of calmness, and it's a kind of happiness. So here we have to understand the difference between happiness and pleasure. Pleasure is not happiness. Pleasure is the stimulation of the senses. When we see beautiful things, that is pleasure. When we hear pleasant music, that is pleasure. When we smell pleasant perfumes, that is pleasure. When we taste pleasant food, that is pleasure. When we touch pleasant things, that is pleasure. But happiness is a state of mind. Happiness is not pleasure. So what we have here in priti is a happiness and not a pleasure. So it's very important to understand the difference between pleasure and happiness. Now when that happiness comes up, a very interesting thing happens. When the real happiness comes up, the muscles in the body relaxes. The relaxation of the muscles, and you begin to feel very comfortable. So when the muscles in the body are relaxed, you feel very comfortable. So that comfort ultimately leads to perfect mental equilibrium. That perfect mental equilibrium is what is called Samadhi. We use the word equilibrium because it's a very important word. Because according to modern scientific thinking, everything in the world is pulled or pushed from outside. That is what is called gravity. Gravity is a pull coming from the earth. If we throw a ball up, it will come down. Why is that? Because it is being pulled. But this means not only that even this earth is being pulled by the sun. The sun is pulling the earth. But not only that, the earth is being pulled by so many other forces also. So you see, there is always something pulling something in this world. And therefore, to be remaining still means it is in balance somehow. That is why it is equilibrium. Equilibrium means the pulls are in an equal state. It is only the tranquility comes. So this is why it is very important to understand that Samadhi is not concentration. Most people translate it as concentration. Samadhi is not concentration, it is a state of mental equilibrium. Now, when you reach that state of mental equilibrium, that is called entering the jhana. Entering the jhana. And what is the meaning of jhana? Now again, a lot of people think jhana is a state of concentration. Jhana is not concentration. Jhana is what is called a withdrawal. Now, if I go out of this room and stay at the door outside, that is called standing out. That standing out is called ecstasy. The word ecstasy is usually understood as getting excited. It is not getting excited. It is standing out of all excitement. That means calming the mind. All the emotional excitement, you are getting out of it. That is standing out. So, you are withdrawing from the world of emotional excitement. It's a withdrawal and standing out. So the first ecstasy is to stand out of the emotional world. And once you have been standing out, you are still thinking, you can form concepts, but those concepts are not concepts that create emotional excitement. It is like this is breathing in, that is a concept. This is breathing out, that is a concept. This is relaxing the body becomes relaxed, that is a concept. So, by observing something, we begin to ask the question, what is this? And then we answer the question. That is the meaning of vitakka and vichara. Vitakka is answering the question and vichara is asking the question. So every concept that we form is answering the question, asking the question. Vitakka and vichara. When we get into the second ecstasy, we stop asking questions and we stop answering questions. That is, we stop conceptual thinking. We might see something, we don't look at the thing and say, what is this? Oh, this is a camera. Oh, what is this? This is a face. We don't think like that. So we may see things, but we don't ask questions and answer questions. That means no conceptual thinking. When that happens, we are in the second jhana, second ecstasy. But still we are left with priti and ekaggata. Priti is that happiness, and ekaggata is the unity or the unification of the mind. The cognitive consonance, it's called, yeah. Because the mind gets separated into two. That is called cognitive dissonance. That means the mind is broken into two parts. That means the emotional part, which is chitta, begins to pull in one direction, and the cognitive part, which is the mano, begins to pull in the other direction. So when this pull in two different directions, that is called vichikiccha, and that is stopped when you turn your mind in only in one direction, which is once you have seen the reality of things, your mind is turned in one direction. So that is the important thing to understand. So when you enter the second jhana or ecstasy, you have the happiness and the comfort and the unification of the mind. When you enter the third jhana, you give up that happiness. That doesn't mean that you become unhappy, but you get into a neutral state. Because happiness at that point is seen as an excitement. So you calm down. And then you are left with comfort and the unity of the mind. Comfort. Then when you get on to the next step, you give up the comfort also. That doesn't mean that you become uncomfortable, but it's a neutral state. And that is, the mind becomes more tranquil. These are degrees of tranquility of the mind. So every step upwards is like climbing a flight of steps. And when you climb a flight of steps, you give up the first step to get into the second step. You give up the second step to get into the third step. You give up the third step to get into the fourth step. That's how it goes. So it's a gradual withdrawal. And when you come to the fourth step, the fourth ecstasy, your mind is completely focused on one thing. But at that point, a new thing comes up. When your focus is on one thing, Now, if I am focusing my attention on something like camera or something, my attention is on that object. But when I go further than that, my attention is not on the object, but on the process of perception. That is, the attention is focused inwards. Inwards means not on the object, but on the process of perception, which means not what I see, but how I see. I am focusing not on what I see, but on how I see. That is very important to understand. To understand that, I sometimes use an analogy. Supposing we have a mirror here, a mirror, and in front of the mirror we put a bird. What do you think the bird will be doing? It will start pecking on the mirror, on the image. Why? Because the bird thinks there is another bird on the outside. But instead of putting the bird, you put your face there. What happens? You begin to see that it is your own face that you see. Why is that? Because you have understood not just what you see, but how you see. You are understanding not what you see, your focus is on how you see it. And so you have understood that it is not your face or someone else's face. It is your own face. So that's the important thing to understand. And then, not only that, another thing happens. When you begin to become aware of the process of perception, you begin to analyze the process of perception. How did this perception take place? And then you begin to see that there are 5 parts to it. And that is what normally is translated as the 5 aggregates. But I translate that as the 5 constituents of the process of perception. 5 constituents of the process of perception. In other words, how I see is simply when I open my eyes, what do I see? Normally, when there is no light here, you don't see anything. You are in the dark. But the moment the light comes, you see. That means the first thing that you see is the light. And the light really comes in the form of 7 colors: violet, indigo, blue, green, orange, red. What we call white is really a mixture of all these colors. And that is how you see white. But white is not the real color. They are all coming in these 7 ways. So in other words, what we really see is color. And when we see something, what we see is simply colors, and out of the colors we create an image. And it is that image that we see. So the image is what is called Rupa. Rupa means the image. And the image is made of colors. And a color also is seen in another way, not in the terms of blue, yellow, red or something, but we see it as beautiful color or an ugly color or a neutral color, which is neither beautiful nor ugly. So 3 ways of seeing it, that is called Vedana. Vedana we translate as feeling, how you feel the color, whether you feel it as something pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. That's the feeling. And the color we call the sensation. So the sensation and the feeling of the sensation. That is what is called Vedana and Sanya. Sanya is the sensation, Vedana is the feeling. So these 2 things are like the 2 bricks that make the wall. Just as you make a wall out of bricks, you make use of the Vedana and the Sanya to create the Rupa, the picture. So the picture or the mental image is created by the color and the feeling. And that creation or construction is what is called Sankhara. Sankhara is the construction. So once you have constructed the image, there is another thing that you do. You see, this is a face that I see, and this is a camera that I see, or this is a rod that I see, or this is a chair, or this is a table. So, in other words, I identify the image. It's an identification, which is giving a name to it. So the name is called Nama, and the mental image is called Rupa. So that process is called perception. That is Vijnana. Vijnana is that process of creating the image and identifying it. That process is called Vijnana, which in the English language is perception. And perception is very important to understand. Once we have perceived something, we begin to identify what we have perceived, and that is the Nama and the Rupa. So, Vijnana Pachya Nama Rupang means once perception has taken place, what you perceive is a mental image and the name, Nama and the Rupa. But another thing happens after that. It's not only seeing, you use your other senses also. Hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. This is why you give something to a small baby. What does the baby do? Begin to touch it and shake it and throw it and do so many things. Why? To get all the information from all the senses. That is why. And so, it's only by getting all the information from the different senses that we begin to see it as an object that exists. We begin to see it as a chair that has a shape and not only color, but even when you touch, this is how it will feel, and everything is there when we see it as an object that is existing out there. So that is what is called Salayatana. Salayatana means you are making use of all the senses. And Pacha Passo. Passa is usually translated as contact. Passa is not contact. Passa is, that is what is called cognition. To cognize something is to understand what it is. If it is, you say this is a chair, that means that is a complete cognition. It's not just contact. And when you cognize something, what are you doing? That is called existential thinking. You are thinking of the existence of something. And this is not only just existential, it is an objective existence. The existence of an object. And once you have seen that, then comes another thing. That means you begin to feel whether it is pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. That feeling begins to start working at that point. And once you begin to feel that it is pleasant, what do? You are attracted to it. You desire what is pleasant and hate what is unpleasant. And if it is neutral, you just let it be. You are not desiring or hating. So that is what is called tanha. Today translated as craving. Tanha is not craving. Tanha is reacting to what is perceived and conceived. So the reaction comes in three ways: attraction to what is pleasant, repulsion to what is unpleasant, and just letting something be. If it is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, you let it be there. You are not reacting to it. but you are aware that it is there. So those are the three things: kama tanha, bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha. Kama tanha is the attraction, vibhava tanha is the repulsion, and bhava tanha is to let it be. You accept it as something that is there. That's all. But there is another thing that happens at that point. Because you have reacted to it. So now you are not only seeing something there, you are also aware of a reaction. Where is the reaction? The reaction is something subjective. What you saw was something objective. So your experience is now divided into two: the object and the subject. And what is subjective? You say, the desire is mine, the hatred is mine, that awareness is mine. You personalize the subjective. When the subjective is personalized, what happens? How can you say this is mine if there is no I here? So the moment you personalize something, you have created the I. I am. This is why Descartes thought, I think, therefore I am. Because he personalized the thinking. The moment he personalized the thinking, he created the self. That's how it happens. But another thing happens. It doesn't end there. Because the moment you have created the I, a question arises. Where is the I? What are you calling the I? You have to provide something that exists. You have to point to something that exists. And what do you point to as the I? The body. It is the body that you point to and say, this is the I. You say, who are you? Then you can say, here, this is me. Yeah, the body. You are pointing to the body. And say, this is the I. The moment you point to the body as yourself, what happens? The body is something that occupies space and time. Because it occupies space, you have a length, breadth and height. But something more, you also have a past, present and future. That is time. And what is your past? The past of the body becomes your past. And that means the past is your birth. Birth of the body becomes your birth. Then the future is the death of the body. And in between is aging. So you see, you have three things: birth, aging and death. The moment you begin to have a thing like that, comes all the grief, lamentation, pain, sorrow and despair. All the suffering comes from that. The moment you get hold of the body as myself, that is what is called Sakkaya Ditthi. Sakkaya Ditthi means the concept of the self as the body. Body becomes the self. When the body becomes the self, you have created suffering for yourself. It is the suffering that you have got hold of as myself. This is why the Buddha said, Sankittena panchupadana khandha dukkha. In short, what is called dukkha or suffering is this collection of things, the 5 constituents of the process of perception. Actually, how do you know that there is a thing called body? Have you seen your body? You have only seen your hands or your abdomen or your legs or something like that. If you want to see yourself properly, you might have to go to see before a mirror. Then only you will see. But even then, you are not seeing it fully. Only other people can see you. This is only a collection of images that you get hold of and say, this is myself. So what you call yourself is simply a collection of images. It is the process of perception itself that you are calling yourself. It's not a real self that you are talking about. If someone takes a picture of you with a camera and show you the picture, oh, this can't be myself, doesn't look like me. Because you have an image of your own in your mind, which is not your real self that other people see. So you see, so ultimately there is no real self here, you have only created the self. You have not only created the self, you have also created the world outside. All this is simply what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Now people, if you go through the history of Western philosophy, you will find that all these philosophers have been started talking about these things. But it was the Buddha who really brought this up properly and pointed out. This Paticca Samuppada is an explanation of how we begin to create a world outside and ourselves inside the world. But in actual fact, there is no real world outside or any real self inside. This is the point. It's only when we have properly understood this, not by just learning it as a philosophy or something, but we have to observe it. That is what we call meditation or insight meditation. Not only ordinary meditation, it is meditation insight. Insight means seeing what is inside. Insight. So this is the meaning of this. And now we have come to the end of our time.
Bhante, you haven't explained the last step.
What is it?
Upekkha. What is upekkha?
The upekkha is really upa ikkati. Upa means inside. Ikkati means to see. So we have been looking inside and seeing inside. There are two things, looking inside and seeing inside. Looking inside is the introspection, which is satipatthana, which is normally called mindfulness. We call it introspection. That is looking inside. Then seeing inside is what is called apperception. Apperception means a perception. It's not really perception. The apperception is looking inside and seeing inside. Seeing inside is the apperception. Looking inside is introspection. So it's very important to understand this fully. And if you have understood this by now, that is, you are an arahant. Arahant means a breaker of bonds. We are being bound. We are bound to this concept of self. It's like we are tied with a rope. And we are tied with a rope to this concept, I am. Just as Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So the thought, I am, is a delusion or a memory or something. We have to awaken from this dream. It's a dream. We are dreaming. It is like a robot that is dreaming that I exist. So we are like that. We are not really, there is no I here. We are only dreaming that we are existing. It's very important to understand that.
She was the one who asked.
Yeah. Now you know how to become awakened, huh?
Escape plan is on.
Huh?
The escape plan. SATTA BOJJHANGÂ is the escape plan.
Yeah. State plan. Well, any questions?
Are there any questions? Just leave it on the table, please.
Oh,
Yeah, they write it down because
Yeah.
you can't hear so well.
many questions, huh?
Can you read, Bhante?
My goodness.
Read it out.
Here, very interesting question. Can we achieve the 7 steps to awakening by breathing meditation and loving kindness meditation. These meditations are really like baby's class. No, not the well, you.
To the university.
Yeah. If not, how do we achieve it? We have already explained how we achieve this. So it's a very long way to go. At the beginning, this breathing meditation can be useful to calm the mind, to relax the body, and also the loving kindness meditation is also not the correct way to translate that. Metta is not loving kindness. I call it universal benevolence. That means it's broadening the mind. Our mind is normally narrow because we are only thinking about ourselves. I want this, I want that, I hate this, all the time I, starting with the I. But we have to think that I am not the only person in this world. There are so many other people, and they also like pleasure and hate pain. And they are also suffering because they can't get the pleasures they want and they can't get rid of the pains they have. That is a problem. And so you begin to think, may all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. May all beings be well. So you are thinking not only about yourself, you are thinking of all beings. That is broadening the mind. That is why I call it universal benevolence. We are thinking of a universal collection of people and things. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful. And it's like the mother thinking of her children, so that mother doesn't think only about herself, but all the children. And the mother has to provide the food, clothing and shelter for the children. So in that same way, you begin to think of all beings. That is the real metta. And that is the way to ultimately get rid of this thought of self altogether. So there again we have three words that we use: metta, karuna, mudita and upekkha. Metta is to broaden the mind in this way. And karuna is to what extent are we interested in the welfare of all beings. That we don't distinguish between myself and others. Others are as important as myself, just as the mother thinks of the children. The children are as important as myself. So when you begin to think in this way, you have karuna. And karuna means the self has disappeared. When the self disappears, all unhappiness disappears. And then you become happy as a result. That is mudita. That is the meaning of mudita. Mudita is the happiness derived from selflessness. There is no more self to talk about. And that is not an emotional excitement. It is a calm, tranquil state of the mind. The mind is centered within and not outside. Whatever happens in the external world, gain or loss, fame or ill fame, praise or blame, pleasure or pain, your mind is not disturbed anymore. Your mind is focused within and it's calm and tranquil. That is upekka. So this is the important thing to understand. Today the translations are misleading. Is the important thing. Huh? So this is why it is very important to understand the meaning of these words. And only when the proper words are used, you begin to understand the real meaning behind.
Yeah, two more.
What? Another question?
This is Bhante.
Which one? If Buddhism says that there is only body, how it is different from materialism? That's a good question. Well, the word materialism is to think of matter. You see, that I told you that when you use all your senses, you begin to think of an object there, a chair. And that chair is matter. That object that exists is what we call matter. So, materialism means to believe that there is only matter in this world. Everything else is not there. Even what we call mind is a creation of matter. That is materialism. That is just half the understanding. Because we are also aware of a thing called mind. And when we begin to think of the mind, we begin to see that matter is a creation of the mind. If matter is a creation of the mind, then that is called idealism. What is called idealism is the idea in the mind. So, what is called idealism is to think that there is only the mind. There is no matter in the world. So, these are two schools of philosophy. There were some people who thought that there is only the mind, and this is why I told you there was a time in the Western history of Western philosophy called the Age of Enlightenment. There were these three philosophers, one from England, another from Ireland, and the other from Scotland. And Locke was the England man who said there is only matter in this world. There is no mind. Then came Berkeley and he said, how can you say that? Because the matter is made of the mind. It is because what we see here, smell, taste, touch, that we are creating matter out of our mind. There is only the mind. So people couldn't find out what is the truth. One man says it is all matter, another man says it is all mind. Who are we going to believe? Then came another man, that was Hume. Hume said, you are both wrong. There is neither matter, neither mind, there is only experience. So that is how the idea of experience came. And really, here the Buddha is partly on this idea of experience. But the Buddha is describing this experience. We are only creating two things called mind and matter through this process of perception and conception. That perception and conception is the experience. This is the important thing to understand. What is this other one?
Last question.
During the gradual withdrawal of chitta, ekaggata is present throughout. Withdrawal of chitta, ekaggata is present throughout.
Four jhanas.
The jhanas. How strong is the presence of ekaggata in the jhanas? Now you have to understand the meaning of ekaggata. It's not, some people translate ekaggata as concentration. Ekaggata is not concentration. Ekaggata means the mind is not divided into two. That is the unification of the mind. So, it's not concentration.
Single pointedness, Bhante.
Huh?
The popular translation of ekaggata is single pointedness or one pointedness.
Yeah, that pointed is not the right word. It's really unification of the mind. Unification, that is the ekaggata. Unity is one. The mind not divided into two.
That means mano and chitta are working in unison.
That's right.
Not in conflict.
Yeah. Mano and chitta not pulling in two different directions.
That's why you translate it as cognitive consonance.
Yeah. Cognitive consonance.
Yes.
We call it, because this is actually, the division is also created by the cognitive process. Because the emotions, the chitta cannot think. Now it is the thinking. It's like, say for example, we take an example. A conflict between the mother and the daughter. Daughter gets hold of some young man and says, I am falling in love with that man. And the mother says, that man is not a good person. Don't go after that man. You say, no, I love him and I can't go. And you see, the daughter begins to bring all kinds of arguments to show that it is right to fall in love with that man. So that means the thinking part is making use of reasons to defend the emotional part. So, in other words, the thinking part is divided into two. That is why it is called cognitive dissonance. The thinking part is the cognitive part. It is the cognitive part that is helping the emotional part. Otherwise, the emotional part cannot give logical reasons. It can only desire things or hate things. Cannot give logical reasons. The logical reason is given by the thinking part.
This diagram.
Yeah.
On the screen.
There you are. Pulling in different directions.
Justify
Cognitive dissonance.
this second statement here.
One, reacts according to feeling. Justify one's emotionally charged decision with clever reasoning. The clever reasoning comes from the cognition.
Mano.
Mano.
Bhante, maybe you can explain the meaning of Vichikicha, because everybody thinks it's translated as skeptical doubt.
Vichikicha is usually translated like that, but what I am saying is that Vichikicha, Vi means separation, and Kicha is coming from thinking. Separation in thinking. Really is Kicha means action. So the action is divided into two. It's like pulling in two different directions. It's in Sri Lanka we have what are called the bullock carts, where the two bulls are tied to a cart, and if the two bulls pull in two different directions, the cart can't go. It's like that. But here I have never seen bullock carts.
Not anymore. We used
No.
to have.
You had
When I was a little boy,
Some areas.
and we buy the cow dung to fertilize our garden.
I see.
Carry the cow dung.
Now you don't have cow dung.
No, we don't buy cow dung. We a lot. Next question, Bhante.
Okay,
Some more?
that's all. Huh?
One more, one. That one, the one you're holding.
This one or this one?
Finish.
All finished.
No, it's finished. Huh?
One last question. Mike, you. Okay.
Yes, written is okay.
Another one. What's that?
You must read it.
My goodness. Last week you mentioned body came first before mind. And in here, just now you mentioned there is no real world outside our mind. And also no real self exists inside. So in here, how is body can spontaneous exist first? Well, these are two things. You are mixing up existential thinking and experiential thinking. Existential thinking is to think of existence, that I exist and the world exists and things exist. That is existential thinking. So when we speak of there is only the body, we are using existential thinking there. The body is existing. But ultimately, both the body and the mind are creations of the process of perception and conception. That's the important thing to understand. Huh? I hope you understood that. Huh? Nothing else. So we can bring this to an end. It's almost 10 o'clock now. We are going to close the doors at the gates. And